everyone. Welcome to our Harmony session. My name's Gabby. I'm part of the go-to-market crew here at Zeppelin. I'm joined by Louis Dorman, a lead product designer, and Robert Burton, a design operation manager at Veeva. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Gabby. Yeah, great to be here.
Thanks, Gabby.
Awesome. Can you tell us a bit about yourselves and your roles at Veeva? And maybe if you had a few extra hours this weekend, how would you enjoy it?
Well, I lead UX through all the different phases of the design system. So everything from design to build to QA to integration. And when I'm not, focused on my computers, I probably just disconnect from technology. I'm in the woods, taking photos of chipmunks in my backyard.
Yeah, and I'm Robert Burton. I'm the operations manager for the design system here at Veeva. I've My primary role is to kind of act as a bridge between the UX engineers, QA, and product squads and leadership. I love working here, and it's been a great last couple of years. When I'm not working at Viva, I like to ride mountain bikes and big avid skier, and I like to take my kids up to the mountains as often as I can.
Those are some awesome hobbies. Viva is huge in the life science space, but for those in the audience who might not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about Viva and what makes you unique in the space?
Yeah, Viva's a growing company. Grown. We've been going since 2007. We have 6,500 employees now. We're a big part of life sciences. 1,200 customers across the world in 165 countries. About 47 out of the top 50 pharmaceutical companies use Viva. We've just been going strong. And if you have any other questions about Viva, we have a great website that kind of explains everything about Viva and where we are at viva.com.
Wow, that's really impressive. Well, I know a few years ago you mentioned you were doing some work on your design system adoption. Can you share a bit more what kicked off that process and what was like life at Viva before Robert joined?
Well, I think like a lot of design systems, they're really owned by the UX department, and we were no different a couple years ago. So it was my job, it was other designers' job to kind of evangelize components, and there wasn't really a structure. There wasn't anyone keeping track of what we need to build next, what was a priority. There was no one really speaking to the PMs, and thankfully we got Robert on, and we've been excelling at building components ever since.
Yeah, I think when I started, there was just a lot of duplication of effort in the overall process.
Mhm.
We're spending a lot of time at the very end, kind of revisiting some of the decisions that were made in the beginning. And not all of the design system was adopted across the entire group of product squads. And so it
Mhm.
was unfamiliar, and there wasn't a lot of transparency into what the design system was doing and what the purpose was.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think you're certainly not alone in some of those problems. Can you share a bit more about what went into the process of overhauling this? I'm sure there were some ups and downs along the way.
Absolutely. We had a ton of learnings in the beginning, both from a design system design perspective and from a company perspective. I think it really started with our ability to speak the same language. Lewis kind of kicked us off really well with embracing those atomic design principles in the beginning.
Yeah, it was probably 2 years ago. It was right before you started, Robert. That was one of the first things that I pinpointed that was kind of crucial, a problem that we needed to fix, and that was uh, adopting the atomic design principles into not only just our UX and sketch and how we define it, but really just our entire steps, like from design to build. And Zeppelin helped, with a lot, and we had all our conversations documented in Zeppelin. Zeppelin helped us use the same language, and this improved our collaboration across teams, like our feature squads to our design system team. And so we were documenting whether a component was an atom or a molecule in Sketch and also in Zeppelin, and that, I think that was a crucial step from right from the beginning.
Yeah, it really helped us identify like the size and scope of each component. We were able to communicate out to the PMs and engineers and QA what are we talking about? How big is this thing? I think it
Hmm.
helped us do that, which kind of kicked off our just overall overhaul of the standardizing of the UX process as well.
What about the design system previews? I mean, you kickstarted that. How did you come up with that?
So in the very beginning, we had it was just an engineering type of this is what we built over the
Hmm.
last week or last 2 weeks, and we started to engage our UX team in that conversation, and suddenly it opened the eyes to the engineering team of what was going on upstream for all these designs, what to expect, and then it overall just streamlined our build process.
Yeah, and that goes right into the next problem, and that was the handoff process. So we really had to formalize that phase. And Robert, you could probably go into that and walk us through kind of your struggles and maybe your success along the way.
Yeah, I think formalizing the handoff process is key in that we want to identify roles and responsibilities in the very beginning when we're kicking off any sort of project or work item. It gives us an opportunity to really highlight specific individuals, what they've done on something, and
Mhm.
request feedback on that. And I think it really opens up the playing field for everybody to communicate equally and support each other. Um,
Yeah,
I think
yeah, and Robert,
reporting. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, as you can see, like that's inside Zeppelin, you could see all the different components that we built. So we have hundreds of these components. So it really helped. So when we said what Imperial Blue was, the developers knew what that color was. The QA team knew what that color was. So, it really alleviated all those frustrations.
Yeah, I think if there was a miscommunication, we would have that handoff recorded. We could all go back, revisit where that communication was, update the process, update the component, and then
Mm.
add all that notes back into Zeppelin.
So this is one that might not be applicable to everyone listening and watching. This is really a struggle that a lot of I guess large scale design system face, and that's regressions, explicit changes. I honestly didn't know about explicit changes until maybe about a year ago when we started to really talk about it on our team. Uh, Robert,
Yeah,
can you explain?
it's important to identify like all the different impacted areas in the beginning of the process.
Mhm.
We started to utilize QA's resources in the very beginning because we want to identify all the different impacted areas of a design
Mhm.
system component. And Louis, you're like 100% right. If we can't identify where those locations are in a small design system component, when we get to a large one, it gets more and more complex. And so um, we would spend a lot of time in the beginning, whether it was in dev discovery or just in an overall review of the component. It may impact one area or it might impact thousands of locations, and all of those locations need to be regressed and tested to make sure the component's operating correctly. So if we start off with that component concept and we
Mhm.
decide we're going to make these changes, it's really important to know how much work is coming down the pipe for QA to check.
Yeah, and that's why dev discoveries are so important. So if we were going to take a legacy component, like a widget, for example, that's not necessarily a component, but it's used throughout the app, we do a dev discovery, which really involves a QA team and dev team. And they go inside the app, they kind of outline what labels are shown, all the different states of that legacy component. That way, when the designer builds it, we have all the different definitions and label structures, so we could, when we do the handoff, we're not breaking anything, which has happened, and that's why we adopted this in our process.
Yeah, and it really initiated the next stage of focusing on the design workflow. If Lewis, if you want to walk us through that, because I think that's key in the very beginning uh, of our process to say, hey, how is this design workflow working?
Yeah, so it's really about choosing the right tools. And for us, you could see, so this is actually our sketch file of all our components, which I really wanted to show how we organize and how we name our folders, how we structure all the alignments. It is kind of it's pretty crucial because what we're currently doing right now is something I think a lot of companies are doing, and that's Figma migration. I think a lot of companies are switching from Sketch to Figma, and the way that we organized in Sketch actually helped that transitionary phase. So this is another video of our Figma file for our foundations and how we organize our colors. And then it's also going to show how we also do that for our components. And I've been doing this for maybe 20 years, Robert. And I remember back in the day, we were doing websites in Quark Express and InDesign, and then and then Photoshop, and then Illustrator. Now we have these great intuitive tools like Sketch and Figma. So there really isn't any excuse, not to organize and not really, properly name folders and not name them, folder 352, for example.
I haven't worked in Quark Express in a while, but that's a good flashback. Uh, I also think utilizing our project tracking was key here. It's communicating out, hey, we're at this stage in the design workflow, showing that to the PMs instead of having sort of an overall bucket of this work is in UX and we'll see it when it comes out. I think it's really great that we have documented that workflow and we share out, hey, we're waiting on peer review, we're waiting on the next stage of the design workflow. We can communicate that out, and I think it really built trust in the design workflow and the process.
Yeah, and that really does help for the next one, and that's establishing the guidelines and templates, which is key, especially for the designers. When we're building components, we know if we need to add interactive layers, if we need to, it's like kind of like a reminder if we want to add light and dark mode, how do we define those properties in Figma? All that is outlined inside our guidelines and templates.
I think
And
it's
here's
cool
an
too.
example. I
Go
was going to
ahead.
say, this is an actual example of our checklist. So it's definitely a good spot if you want to take a screenshot, maybe adopt that in your own design system. So we have this in not only in Sketch and Figma, but also lives in our DSM, which is our design system manager, which is basically just a CMS of how we define the components, we document the components. So it all lives in all those different areas that the designers frequent.
And I think it works in a couple different ways. It's a great way for Louis to manage all of the different folks who are engaged in this in these events and be able to update it. Even as early as like last week, we got some feedback that said, "Hey, can we make some changes to this checklist, or can we update this guideline?" That to me is saying that people outside of the design system are thinking about these processes and templates
Mm.
as an overall like design thinking template. So they're saying, hey, we want to make these changes and we want to make them for now and into the future. I think that's a really
Mm.
big step in the progress of the design system and the adoption. So one of the things that proved as a great result for us was 100% of Android was developed inside of the design or with the
Yeah,
design system.
100%, which is, a lot of not a lot of apps have 100% components in their app.
Yeah, and because of our experience and the success of the design system, PMs took that on from the very beginning and said we're going to do this and make it 100% in the design system, and we were able to start off with the right foot. Since then, we've integrated over 450 iOS components all across the apps. That's hundreds of thousands of different locations all across the apps that these things are updated in.
Yeah,
All of
hundreds of
our PMs,
variants.
yeah, and
Yeah, sorry
organization. So
to
it's not
interrupt.
just, no, you're good. It's not just in a single application. It's multiple organizations use all these components in different ways. Um,
Yeah, and we also did those two large scale audits a couple years ago. So
yeah,
one was with replacing PNG icons in our app to vector SVG icons. I mean, there was just hundreds of these just crazy icons floating around. So that was pretty huge. And then also replacing all these hex colors, hundreds of hex colors, and semantic colors. So we would have colors that was named line, dark gray, and then a spot. Like it was just ridiculous. So we defined all those into a palette of about 60 primary, secondary, and alert colors.
yeah, it was a huge effort, and that effort has paid off significantly because we've got all the
Mhm.
engineers know where these palette colors are. They know which vector art icons they want to use. It's really great.
Mm.
Wow, 100% adoption is so impressive. Those are some amazing takeaways. Thanks for walking us through that. Well, we've covered so much in the last 20 minutes. What's one thing you would recommend to audience members who are working towards an integrated and adopted design system?
Well, if I was going to pick one, Gabby, it would probably be hire someone dedicated to design ops because I've seen the difference. I've seen the contrast of having someone dedicated to that role and not. And if I was going to have two, it would be peer review. So that would be my number one.
Yeah, I agree. I think all these are good takeaways. I think the design system preview was probably what we got the most out of, initiating the conversation between UX and engineering, having some, transparency about like why we made certain design decisions and communicating that to engineering, and that back and forth is really valuable. I think uh, I was telling Lewis that there's a engineer came to us and said, that really provided sort of a bigger
Mhm.
picture preview of what's going on in our application and the company. It was really helpful for them. So I'd say that's my number one. On that note, I think I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation of where we're at Veeva. We are so thankful for having Zeppelin uh, ask us to come present here today. I wanted to let you all know that we're hiring designers and developers and product managers here at Veeva. So if you're interested, please reach out to us on our either on our website or directly on LinkedIn. Um, I want to say a big thank you to our team back at Veeva. They've got engineers, UX designers, product managers, QA that all have helped us take this design system to where it is today, and we wouldn't be anywhere without them. So thank you so much. And thanks so much for having us, Gabby.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lewis and Robert. That was great. And thanks to everyone who attended this session. Super excited for the rest of Harmony. I'm going to hand it back to Nico and Sheetal. Bye, everyone. Thank you.